What's up, Vikings fans? Gabe Henderson here from the Vikings Entertainment Network. Today, I have the special privilege of being joined by our friend from NBC Sports, three-time National Sports Writer of the Year, Peter King. How's it going, Peter?
Gabe, good to be with you. How are you?
I'm good. So rumor has it you're at the TCO Performance Center right now. Are you able to share any information with the fans on why you're there right now and what's going on?
Well, I wanted to get an idea of what players and coaches and teams were going to see when and if they get back to work. So I was fortunate enough to get a tour of a very sanitary Minnesota Vikings training facility. And, you know, I think one of the things that I think has become pretty obvious is that for NFL teams to be able to make it through the next 5 or 6 months, if there is going to be a season, if teams are going to be able to make it work, I think where players and coaches and team employees go to work every day is going to have to be, you know, so clean in all ways that anybody who is trying to avoid COVID-19 could easily come into an NFL training facility and feel comfortable that they were working in a pristine environment. And I think that is what Vikings and the other 31 teams are really endeavoring to accomplish.
Based off of your knowledge and then some of the things that you've seen today, what will some of that testing look like?
Yeah, Gabe, I think, you know, as we speak, the owners and the players are still negotiating about whether there's going to be, will there be daily testing of all employees? Will it be every other day? And so those are the things that, you know, as we record this, we just don't know. But I do think that every team has to be aware that it is basically going to be able to provide an environment where people don't get infected. And if they show up with an infection, that they're going to be handled well. And I think that's what all 32 teams are going to have to prove that they can do.
Heading into this time of the year, you're usually doing your camp tours. So that will probably be not the same for you, but what will you miss the most under this current environment?
It really gives a chance to basically take the temperature of a lot of teams. And, you know, in an average year, you know, last year when I was at Jacksonville Jaguars camp, you know, spent a half hour or 45 minutes with Doug Marrone. And, you know, I was never there again because the Jaguars weren't particularly newsworthy. And it allows you basically to do sort of a refresher course in 21, 22, 23 teams every year. So that's going to change this year. You know, the new media rules, assuming there is going to be training camp, the new media rules will prevent us from actually sitting down and talking to players. So that'll be different. That'll be weird. And I guess coaches are going to be able to decide whether they want to, you know, using social distance, talk to the media in person or on phone or on video conference. So all of it is going to be different and all of it is new. But I mean, I think it'd be silly to complain about it when, you know, 135,000 people around the United States are dead. And where every day 50 or 60 or 70,000 more people are being discovered with COVID-19 or diagnosed rather. And so I don't view it as, it certainly is, it is a disadvantage. I won't be able to be as hands-on with teams as I normally am, but I'm not in mourning over it. I want the country to be able to get back to normal as soon as possible.
In this profession for over 4 decades, and having that knowledge, when these guys do get on the field, what do you expect from the Vikings this season? In your preseason power rankings, you had the Vikings at 11th. Do you still stand there right now as of today? Like, how do you see this season going for the Vikings?
Yeah, I think they have a chance to be an explosive offense. If I were a Vikings fan, I'd be really excited about, is a healthy Dalvin Cook theoretically for a full season. Dalvin Cook is what Kirk Cousins really, really needs. He can definitely be a quarterback's best friend. And I think the Vikings drafted well and drafted smart. And I think the one other thing about the Vikings that, I wonder about, and we'll see how it works. But my feeling is, and again, he's still out there, so you just don't know. But I'm going to be interested to see what happens now with Danielle Hunter, with or without Everson Griffin. I look at, I've always thought Everson Griffin is a difference maker in almost every game he plays. And so that's going to be a really interesting position to look at this year for the Vikings. But look, I think the one thing that you saw last year that the Vikings handled well is they handled an offense that basically threw the ball about 10 times a game less in 2019 than in 2018. It was actually a better offense. So I do think that, assuming that they can have that good 1-2 punch at the running back position that they had last year, I really like what I see, like what I'm going to see out of Vikings, assuming there are games played. And I also think that, this is a year that Kirk Cousins is going to have weapons that, even though some of them are going to be very, very young and they're untested, but I think he's going to have enough weapons to win with.
Speaking of Kirk Cousins, of course, we know this is a quarterback-driven league. He has the weapons around him on offense. How much of this offense, team success, do you put on Kirk Cousins' shoulders?
I think you look at every team in the NFL right now and you say, are they a contender to go play deep into January? And I can't think of a single team out there right now that's a contender to play deep into January that doesn't have a quarterback that's a top 10 or 12 quarterback in the NFL. And so I look at the Vikings and I say, I think that Kirk Cousins basically with this team, with these tools, and again, health is such a fleeting thing around the NFL.
Yeah.
And so almost everything you have to say is, well, Adam Thielen, is he going to be healthier than he was a year ago? And even though they're without Stefon Diggs, obviously you look at it and you basically say, okay, have they replaced Stefon Diggs in this lineup? And I think they have, maybe not exactly the production, but you also remember that theoretically, if Thielen is there more and plays more and more effectively than he did a year ago, I think that is also going to make up for some of the loss of Diggs. So I think Kirk Cousins, I think he's going to have a very good year, and I think he's going to prove that the Vikings made the right decision in investing in him, even though it's more for the midterm future. I think they did a smart thing in investing in him so that he can be the quarterback going forward for the next 3 years.
What can fans expect from a rookie receiver? What kind of impact should they expect him to make coming in year one?
Well, my feeling is watching, and I'm not a huge college football watcher, Gabe, but last year I watched 2 LSU games from start to finish. The Alabama game and then the national championship game. And Justin Jefferson, to me, looks like an NFL receiver. I think he's a precise route runner. I think he's got very good hands, and I think he's fearless. And look, I think a lot of people will look at him and say maybe he doesn't have some of the experience, obviously, of a Stefon Diggs. Look, you can always say this about players in the draft. I just thought he'd be gone by 15 or 17, somewhere around there. And look, the draft obviously went a little bit different than people thought, with Jerry Jeudy lasting as long as he did. And so it's not, you can't predict every year what you're going to see. But to me, when I look at Justin Jefferson, I think he's a year one contributor in a big way. And, obviously the Vikings had to have felt that way about him, or they never would have drafted him that high. And I think they would not have been as confident letting go, of Stefon Diggs if they didn't like Jefferson and some of the other receivers in this draft.
Of course, we know there's an extra playoff spot up for grabs in both conferences, NFC, AFC. But the number 2 seeds clearly lost most out of this plan. So do you see any consequences from this expansion?
Yeah, I think what we're going to see most years is that virtually every team, unless a team has a, like a 2-game lead, is say, 14-1 entering the final game of the season, and then they've probably got the number 1 seed wrapped up. I think there's a better chance that every team is going to have to play 16 games than maybe 2 or 3 teams just basically saying, well, we're locked into where we are, so we really don't have to play, in week 17. But Gabe, I think one of the other really interesting things is over the years, obviously teams want that number 1 seed.
Yeah.
But in essence, if they already have one of those 2 seeds clinched entering week 17, most coaches are going to lean toward resting quite a few players if these coaches can. So that is what I think is probably going to change, that you're probably going to see more meaningful football played in week 17 than you normally did.
Leave you on this question. Of course, we know Mike Zimmer is known for, his development of young cornerbacks. You bring in 2 cornerbacks this year, Jeff Gladney, Cameron Dantzler. You grab those guys 1st and 3rd round in the draft this year. When you have the bread and butter of your defense is the linebacker and the safety position, do you think they'll have to depend more on, the veterans, or do you think it'll be the veterans depending on these young guys more to make sure, they aren't the weak link of this defense?
I'll tell you, Gladney is huge to this team this year. He's huge because if you are in a division where Matthew Stafford and or Aaron Rodgers, both of them have a good chance to throw for over 4,500 yards. 1/4 of your schedule is against 2 quarterbacks who are, top 5 in the league in yards by the end of the year, probably. So that both of those guys are going to be looking at this young Minnesota secondary and are going to be testing a guy like Gladney very early and very often. He's huge to what the Vikings do. And that's why, if you talk to coaches, I mean, I'm sure Mike Zimmer would tell you that, it isn't just the corners, it's also the pass rush. And that's why I also think that whatever happens opposite Danielle Hunter is going to have a huge amount to do with whether they can make up the slack for, a missing piece or 2 on that front 7.
I could talk to you all day about this, but I got to get you out of here. I appreciate your time, Peter.
Gabe, thanks a lot for having me.